This video contains a personal account of psychological collapse during a Vipassana meditation retreat. It includes references to psychosis, suicidal ideation, and trauma. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please seek professional help. Millions of people struggle with anxiety, depression, and burnout. Therapists are hard to access, and healing can take years. But what if there was a shortcut? A 10-day silent retreat that promises to clear your mind. No phones, no talking, no distractions. Just sit, breathe, observe, and watch your problems disappear. That's the promise of Vipassana meditation, as taught by Goenka. I signed up hoping it would help, some quiet time to reflect and reset. But after 6 days of silence, food and sleep deprivation, and mounting anxiety, the opposite happened. On the 7th evening, I hit a wall, mentally and literally. I didn't have my phone, my wallet, or even the keys to the lock for my bike. I didn't know the time. A second felt like 10 minutes. The center was deep in the countryside. Everything was still, but inside, my thoughts were racing. I was overcome with fear. All I knew was, I had to leave. So I jumped over the wall and ran. At that point, fear had completely overridden rational thought, and there was no one I could trust, not even myself. Vipassana means insight in Pali, an ancient Indian language. Vipassana meditation means to meditate for hours with closed eyes and without moving. While sitting completely still, you're supposed to scan your body for any sensations you might feel, over and over again. This, according to Buddhist beliefs, will give you insight into how things really are. Goenka was a businessman from Myanmar. Goenka gave his first Vipassana course over 50 years ago, and is still, despite being dead, the main teacher at the courses held today. The teachers at Vipassana centers simply press play and let Goenka speak. The website of the Vipassana centers states that to maintain the uniformity of teaching, Goenka decided that teachers would use recordings of his own instructions, discourses, and chanting. Every Vipassana retreat follows the same structure. Day 0, arrival. That evening, noble silence begins. All conversation stops. Days 1 to 9, wake up at 4:30 a.m. to the clang of a gong. Meditate in silence for 10 hours a day, 2 simple vegetarian meals, breakfast and lunch, eaten in silence. The only break in sound is the scrape of cutlery. Evenings, a recorded discourse by Goenka, then sleep and repeat. Day 10, noble silence ends. Students are allowed to speak and practice loving kindness meditation. Day 11, one final meditation before departure. In his nightly talks, Goenka insists on 2 things.
Vipassana is not a cult. It is not a dogma.
Instead, he calls it a scientific method to purify the mind, free of dogma or ritual. But here's the paradox. Every part of the retreat, the silence, the precepts, the focus on impermanence, is pure Buddhist philosophy. Goenka reframed Buddhist teachings as personal experimentation. Rather than just believe the Buddha, he reframed it as seeing it for yourself. I joined a Vipassana course because I wanted space to think. No phone, no distractions, maybe even some insight into my difficult family relationships. I followed the rules exactly. I didn't break the silence, didn't skip sessions. If I'm going to do this, I'll do it properly, I told myself. Each night, Goenka reminded us that full commitment was required. Otherwise we might miss the promised benefits. A calm mind, a happy life, complete freedom from suffering. But the calmer I was supposed to get, the worse I felt. By day 5, I couldn't meditate. My thoughts were racing. My body was buzzing. I barely slept. I started to experience strange sensations. My lips felt huge on one occasion. I saw flashes of color during meditation. Part of me thought, is this progress? But mostly, I was scared. I finally spoke to one of the course managers and the teacher. They said it was all normal. Not just normal, good. They smiled, even congratulated me. The meditation is working. They said I could rest for a while, but encouraged me to get back to meditating as soon as possible. So I trusted them and kept going. Goenka's nightly talks include a key concept, sankharas, deep, subconscious reactions stored in the body and mind. He explained that when we meditate deeply, these sankharas rise to the surface and dissolve. Fear, grief, panic, these are old patterns passing away. If you're in pain, that's not a problem. It's a sign the meditation is working. Just observe, don't react, don't resist, keep meditating. From a trauma therapy perspective, these same symptoms, panic, disassociation, sleeplessness, are signs of an overwhelmed nervous system. According to Bezel van der Kolk in The Body Keeps the Score, healing requires connection. Feel the emotion, understand the cause, process it in a safe environment. Meditation as taught in the Goenka system actively discourages these healthy responses. On the evening of day 6, after a talk describing yogis who meditate even in their sleep, I had a full-blown panic attack. That night, I didn't sleep. By morning, my body was flooded with sensations, buzzing, disorientated, unreal feelings. I couldn't join the group anymore. I sat behind glass watching. No phone, no talking, no distractions. Just me and my spiraling thoughts. I was starting to lose touch with reality. Eventually, I managed to silently signal to my wife, who was in the women's section. We met by the fence under the cover of darkness, whispering just a few words. It felt like breaking the law. We'd been living like this for a week, and looking back, it's strange how quickly we accepted it, like schoolchildren obeying invisible rules. But that's what we had become. Students. Obedient, silent, don't speak, don't question, finish the course. That night, we agreed to leave the next day. But when my wife left, the panic came rushing back. I told myself, just one more night, I can do this. But I couldn't. The official Vipassana Code of Discipline says, all students must observe noble silence, silence of body, speech, and mind. Any form of communication with fellow students, gestures, sign language, written notes, is prohibited. Students may speak with the teacher when necessary, but even that should be kept to a minimum. Students should cultivate the feeling that they are working in isolation. And that's exactly what I was doing, suffering in isolation. After our terrifying experience, we were desperately looking for answers, and it turned out we were not alone with our questions. Others had had similar and even worse experiences. The podcast, The Retreat, by the Financial Times, tells the story of 2 young women who took their lives after attending a Vipassana course. The women are called Jackie and Megan. Jackie, who was living and travelling in her van, had a history of fragile mental health, including suicide ideation. The volunteers at the course were informed about this. During the course, Jackie experienced persistent emotional distress. She left early and drove off with her van. After not hearing from Jackie, her parents reported her missing. A few days after she had left the course in her van, she was found dead by police officers. Jackie had taken her own life. What exactly happened at the centre is unknown, but what is clear is that Jackie had struggled for days without receiving help. The volunteers at the centre did not call the police or inform her family. The other young woman, Megan, returned to her family unrecognisable. She was later diagnosed with psychotic episodes of unknown origin. According to Megan's mum, the volunteers at the course called her on the 9th day and asked her to pick up her daughter, saying she was a little bit confused. They didn't give any sense of an emergency. After the course, still struggling with psychotic episodes, Megan emailed the Vipassana Centre, asking for help. In her last email, she wrote she needs to give up her life for a purer one, and asked how she could do that. Megan never received a reply. A few weeks later, Megan took her life. First aid guidelines for psychosis instruct to not assume that any symptoms of psychosis will go away on their own, and to seek medical help immediately, otherwise symptoms can worsen. After the podcast was released, many more people reached out, stating they had similar disturbing experiences at a 10-day Vipassana course. It seems like losing touch with reality after several days of silence and isolation is not uncommon. Humans are social animals. Our brains are wired for connection, not just emotionally, but biologically. We rely on others for regulation, orientation, and even our sense of self. In isolation, without meaningful contact or activity, stress hormones spike. Our grip on reality begins to loosen. Thoughts spiral, impulses take over. This is called social reality testing, our need for others to validate what's real and what isn't. Without it, people can fall into obsession, depression, delusion, even hallucinations and suicide ideation. Inside of a Vipassana retreat, isolation isn't a side effect, it's the method. Over time, this begins to reshape the brain. The limbic system, responsible for fear, memory, and emotion, becomes hyperactive. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, our moral reasoning and decision-making center, starts to shut down. Emotions take over logic. This is why some participants experience panic attacks, depressive episodes, even psychosis, and yet these are reframed as spiritual progress, as deep sankharas being released as purification. Prolonged forced isolation is recognized as a form of torture by the UN. A Vipassana course lasts only 10 days, and participants sign up voluntarily, but once you arrive, the instructions are clear. Leaving early is highly discouraged. Some students report being told that leaving the course early will create emotional imbalance or destroy the equanimity they're developing. Emotional distress is reinterpreted as progress. You're not suffering, you're healing. You're not panicking, you're purifying. For me, things broke during another sleepless night. Time slowed down. My thoughts spun and I became convinced that the food was drugged, that they had a plan for me. I feared I was being recorded. Every word I whispered to myself, I imagined it being played back. Eventually, I ran. I climbed over a wall shouting for my wife, believing it was life or death. What followed was a total psychological collapse. I believed I had become the Buddha, that I had died multiple times, that I could speak to my wife telepathically, and most terrifying of all, I became convinced that to truly free ourselves from suffering, I had to end both our lives. Later, the doctors confirmed I had suffered a full-blown psychotic episode. Hallucinations, delusions, paranoia. I had lost touch with reality. When I jumped that wall, I screamed for my wife. She came immediately, but nobody from the center did. Even when my wife screamed, still, nobody came. My wife hoped someone would stop us, or help. No one did. Eventually, she had to run from me, back to the center, to get help. When she told them what was happening, their first response wasn't alarm or compassion. It was, "Are you going to finish the course?" She told them I might kill myself. They said they couldn't do anything without the teacher, and the teacher was busy. They smiled, they nodded, but they didn't listen. The only thing they seemed to care about was whether we would finish the course, because finishing, they said, would bring equanimity. Psychological harm from meditation is well documented in psychology, though rarely talked about publicly. Dr. Willoughby Britton, a clinical psychologist, began researching meditation while practicing it herself. She expected improved sleep. Instead, she found the opposite. Brain activity spiked and sleep worsened. For a while, she kept the data private, worried it would damage meditation's reputation, until one day, a teacher casually told her, "Everybody knows meditation makes you stop sleeping." That was the turning point. She founded Cheetah House, a resource for those suffering from meditation-related distress. She emphasizes that these effects can happen to anyone, even those without a history of mental illness. In my case, I spent 3 months in a clinic after the breakdown. Doctors found no history of psychosis, no prior symptoms. They just diagnosed me with generalized anxiety. Since then, I've had no further issues. According to Dr. Britton, intensive meditation can cause anxiety, insomnia, panic attacks, loss of appetite, disassociation, and emotional instability. In rare cases, psychosis and mania, although these are more common in retreat settings. And worse, when symptoms arise, practitioners are often told that the distress is part of the path, that not sleeping is a sign of progress, that panic is purification. On the surface, Goenka's Vipassana retreats appear benign, free, voluntary, secular. But if you look closely, contradictions pile up. You're told to only believe what you experience yourself, but every night through his lectures, Goenka tells you exactly what your experience means. You're told there's no guru, but everything revolves around Goenka, a man who died over a decade ago. You're told there are no rituals, but the day begins with Pali chanting. Students repeat sadhu, sadhu, sadhu after each discourse. It's not an accident. This is doublethink, holding two contradictory beliefs at once. It's how systems rewire the mind. The reality is, they control your language, replacing ordinary words with spiritual ones. Sankharas, equanimity, suffering. They control your behavior with 10-hour meditations, no phones, no reading, no talking, no movement. They control relationships, cutting contact with the outside world completely. They control status, subtly rewarding those who donate, volunteer, or serve. They control information, delivering all teachings exclusively through Goenka's recordings. There's no space for dialogue, reflection, or critical questions. They control emotion, bombarding students on the final day with loving kindness meditation and a strong push to donate. At the peak of vulnerability, after days of isolation, sleeplessness, and sensory deprivation, the system floods you with euphoria and belonging. Then, at your most emotionally vulnerable, they ask for donations. Shockingly, there are also children's courses. Their courses are shorter, but just as controlling, and children are even more susceptible to indoctrination. After my psychotic break, my wife and I were kept apart. Each of us told a different story about what had happened. The teacher sat with me, not to help, but to reframe. He steered every conversation back to Goenka, to his charm, his teachings, his greatness. I was vulnerable, broken, and they used it as an opportunity to deepen my connection to Goenka. Not once did they ask if I wanted medical help. They told me I'd climbed a great mountain, that my psychosis was a milestone. They even suggested I try meditating again, in a meditation cell, a small dark room, just like an isolation cell. I don't believe these people are evil. Most of them started like I did, curious and sincere. But somewhere along the way, they surrendered their agency to a system that doesn't care who gets hurt, as long as the path is followed. At first glance, Vipassana meditation, as taught by S.N. Goenka, seems like a neutral, universal technique, open to anyone. Some just curious about meditation, others hoping for inner peace. But once the course begins, a different picture emerges. You hand over your phone and wallet. You're told repeatedly that leaving early will harm you. The course isn't led by a living teacher, but by recordings of a man who died over a decade ago. And what he teaches isn't science. It's a religious worldview, wrapped in the language of science. You're silent, isolated, disconnected from reality. The only voice you hear is Goenka's, chanting and instructing. He says to eat less, that it's normal to stop sleeping, and that your fear, your panic, and your distress are signs that the method is working, that his way is the only way. This is how a meditation course can unravel your sense of self, how a search for peace can lead to psychological harm, how something that sounds so innocent can end in a psychosis. We made this video to break the silence, to help those lost in a belief system to find their voice again, and to remind you to not stop speaking, but to start questioning. If you've been affected by what you've heard, please know this: you are not alone. Support exists. Healing is possible.